Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most high-stakes, honestly kind of controversial debates in construction claims. We're going to look at this as a heavyweight clash between two industry pros, the strict, contract-bound claims consultant and the boots-on-the-ground, resource-strapped contractor. You see, when an extension of time, or EOT claim, is submitted, there's usually this massive disconnect between the messy reality of the site and the very rigid rules sitting on the consultant's desk.
Okay, let's just quickly look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the EOT evaluation process, hit notice and records, the critical path test, look at a 20-day delay dilemma, compare critical path versus TIA, and finally wrap up with the core EOT evaluation questions. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The EOT evaluation process. We really have to start by establishing the baseline rules from the consultant's perspective, basically determining if a claim even qualifies to be looked at in the first place.
So before anyone even analyzes a scheduled delay, the contract itself absolutely must allow for an extension of time based on specific events. When a consultant opens a file, red pen in hand, ready to go, the literal first question they ask is, does the contract actually allow an EOT for this specific trigger? They want clear, contractual grounds. We're talking about things like variation orders, or VOs, where the client changes the scope. Or maybe there were late drawings from the design team, delayed site access that completely block the contractor from starting, or force majeure events, those wild, unforeseeable acts of nature that nobody can predict. If your delay isn't rooted in one of these accepted categories, well, the consultant just ends the debate before it even starts.
All right, Section 2, Notice, Records, and Denials. Let's move to the harsh reality of claim administration and see how a lack of paperwork can literally kill a legitimate request instantly. Listen, it is a brutal truth in this industry that missing a contractual deadline for notice letters causes an automatic claim denial, period. The underlying facts don't even matter at that point. Imagine you're a contractor scrambling on site to deal with, say, a sudden flood or a massive variation order. You're completely focused on fixing the problem, right? But while you're putting out those fires, the clock is ticking on a strict 14 or 28-day notice period. If you report that claim on day 29 of a 28-day notice period, it fails. Done. We see incredibly valid, highly disruptive claims rejected outright simply because the paperwork was 24 hours late. Honestly, that sudden panic of realizing a notice letter missed the deadline is a feeling every contractor absolutely dreads.
Because in construction, evidence wins claims, not opinions. You have to meticulously compile these specific records. It is non-negotiable. Notice letters, site reports, updated schedules. If you don't have records, you really don't have a claim. It's that black and white. Think of site reports as the daily pulse of your project. Without them, trying to prove that a specific area was blocked off on a specific Tuesday, it's impossible. Contractors really have to understand that an EOT evaluation isn't about who's right in theory, it's entirely about who has the paper trail to back it up. Proper notice and comprehensive supporting documents, they are the absolute lifeblood of any successful claim.
Moving on to Section 3, the critical path test. We have now arrived at what is often the single biggest hurdle a contractor faces in the consultant's evaluation process. The big question, did the delay affect the critical path? If the answer is yes, okay, an EOT might actually be granted. But if the answer is no, it's almost always a swift, hard rejection. This right here is the consultant's golden rule. The critical path, which is basically the longest sequence of dependent tasks that dictates your final project end date, is the ultimate litmus test. The consultant will evaluate what caused the delay, and then they ask this binary question. Did it hit the critical path? If a delay pushes out tasks that aren't on that main sequential artery, the consultant will just argue that the overall project completion isn't truly threatened, and therefore, no time extension for you.
Which brings us to Section 4, the 20-day delay dilemma. Let's pivot our perspective to the contractor's reality on the ground and look at a specific, very real-world construction delay.
Just imagine an inciting incident where a client delays critical project approvals by exactly 20 days. And by the way, this isn't some wild hypothetical. This happens literally all the time. The contractor submits shop drawings for a vital structural steel component, and the client, for whatever reason, just sits on them. And the clock ticks. Day 1, Day 5, Day 15, Day 20.
Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast you're seeing. Because of that 20-day holdup, the contractor suffers severe resource disruption. We're talking expensive, heavy equipment sitting completely idle, and specialized workers just standing around waiting for the green light. Obviously, that leads to a massive drop in productivity. If you take a snapshot of the project in this moment, you'll see them rapidly burning through float. That buffer time built into the schedule for non-critical tasks. And naturally, all of this equals additional, totally unrecoverable costs for the contractor. Yet, on the flip side,
Because those specific delayed tasks weren't on the strict critical path we just talked about, the project's overall final deadline hasn't moved an inch. And despite the very real pain of consumed float and lost productivity, here is the strict, unyielding response you are typically going to hear from the consultant. No critical path impact, no EOT. This right here is where the debate gets incredibly heated. From the consultant's legal and contractual viewpoint, hey, the system worked. The end date didn't move, so no extra time is given. Simple. But from the contractor's viewpoint, they just bled money for 20 days because of a client error. Their project buffer is completely gone, and they're just left holding the bag. Did the contractor suffer an impact? Of course they did. But the rigid application of the rule just completely misses that part of the story.
Section 5, Critical Path versus TIA. This clash between rigid rules and practical, boots-on-the-ground suffering brings us directly to the core debate over how we actually analyze these delays. Here we can clearly see the legal and practical differences between two very different analytical methods. On the left, the current standard, strict critical path analysis. It basically only evaluates simple schedule end date delays. The pro, well, it's legally straightforward, it's binary. The con, it completely ignores the reality on the ground. On the right, we have time impact analysis, or TIA. This is a much more comprehensive approach. TIA actually calculates the legal and financial impact of resource disruption, float consumption, and productivity loss right at the time of the delay. The huge debate raging in the industry right now is whether EOT evaluations should evolve to prioritize TIA over that traditional, rigid critical path test, because doing so might just ensure a fairer outcome for contractors who are forced to absorb these invisible costs.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 6, Core EOT Evaluation Questions. To help you organize your delay evidence, let's summarize the established framework.
Contractors really must use this final checklist to guarantee they're comprehensively addressing the contractual rules and the required documentation. No matter which side of the debate you fall on, you've got to be able to answer these 5 core questions. 1. Is there contract entitlement? 2. Was proper notice given on time? 3. What is the verifiable cause of delay? 4. Was there a critical path impact? And 5. Are there sufficient supporting documents, like those crucial site reports and updated schedules we talked about, to actually prove it all? Without solid evidence for these 5 pillars, a claim will almost certainly fail in the current system.
So given everything we've explored in this explainer today, from the nightmare of missing paperwork to the harsh reality of idle workers and uncompensated float loss, I'll leave you with this question. Is the current industry standard actually equitable? When a contractor suffers massive resource disruption but the end date doesn't shift, is it fair to just deny them relief based purely on a schedule diagram? Should the system finally evolve to formally recognize productivity loss and time impact analysis? I really want you to think about how these rigid rules impact the reality on the ground the next time you're looking at a delayed project. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the EOT paradox. Keep questioning the process, and I'll catch you next time.